Judging by its name and an unassuming title design, Noragami caught my attention just like that. I am fond with this kind of setting where Japanese mythology remains hidden within modern society, obscured from public eye. Japanese gods and deities slaying Japanese demons never gets old for me. Slap a katana as the main weapon on screen just takes another of my checkbox. But despite being a shonen show and produced by Studio Bones, which is known for their incredible fight scenes, combat is not the shiniest part of the show, which came to me as a surprise. Granted, tackling a show to meet expectations is never my priority. If a show leads away opposite of what I expected, it won't ruin the fun for me. I just keep my arms open to any interesting ideas they have in store ready to toss at me. And if they are truly able to engage me to a certain degree, I will embrace it for what it is. Noragami has that surprise in store to deliver, which is the theme of bond. The bond between gods and their weapons called regalias had surprisingly piqued my interest very early on, so I can pardon the fact that it is less about slaying demons in fashionable choreography and hoping for it to show me how far they can bring the theme to places. And they did explore the theme bit by bit as it goes. But by the time they are done with Season 1, I don't think they have dug deep enough into this most noteworthy element Noragami has to offer. That is why I'm glad there was a Season 2 to mitigate the lackluster experience I got out of the initial weaker season, in my opinion. Noragami started off by setting its premise and concepts with 2 episodes, along with the introduction of Yato, a unpopular, shrineless god, and his encounter with the female lead high school girl Hiyori, tying up their ties as most shows tend to do. And then it jumps into a follow-up arc of Yukine, a new regalia who will be serving Yato. The introduction of this trio is the first step of Noragami's theming, and right after that, the rest of the episodes is an original arc, created exclusively for the anime to have a proper closure for the season, featuring Rabo as the villain, a calamity god who fought side by side with Yato in the past. Reasons why the opening arcs are weaker in my eyes are closely related to the characters under the spotlight. Yukine's character arc of coming to terms as a regalia turned out to be a drag, and the hurdles and complexions he faces are problems I found easily fixable if not for the lack of communication between him and his master Yato. I'm aware his rebellious attitude is part of his initial characterization, and his relationship with Yato and Hiyori is similar to a family in the making, with Yato as the father figure, trying to foster a straying soul under his care. Hiyori's caring personality serves as the mother figure, and Yukine himself as an adopted child. But the sheer ignorance of everyone by not taking the step forward to ask each other questions really creates a stalemate that comes out as frustrating to experience, hence it feels like excessive padding to me. Now, I admit it translates the issue in quite a realistic way. Miscommunication problems between parents and teens could run long term or even forever. As an Asian living in Asia ever since I was born, I can tell you that the culture here do encourages staying silent sometimes, or hoping the other side would eventually understand as time goes by, instead of laying the issue bare on the table and untie the knots together. As the saying goes, silence is gold. So disagreements may never dissolve between both parties and bad blood remains. In Chinese, this communication wall between the elders and their offsprings is referred to as 代沟. If you translate the term to English, it simply results as generation gap. But the terminology when used in this specific context would mean there's a clash of ideologies and outlooks between both generations, and they couldn't see eye to eye in a lot of aspects in life. It's not like people hold grudges or anything, they just prefer to have less noise under the roof and let harmony covers the conflicts. Not that I support or agree with practices like this personally, even the show tells us it can be destructive. But I thought it would be interesting to bring this up as to justify the son and father conflicts being portrayed here in Noragami, using a cultural behavior of some sort. I suppose in Japan, a country where its culture shares a lot of similarities with the Chinese, may have these household problems ingrained within its society to a certain degree, or at least suffers a similar phenomenon close to what I have mentioned. And in Yukine's case, it might ring true to a lot of teenagers of that age, the demographic of shonen manga for example. But for the others, angsty teen problems may be a little hard to swallow because of cultural differences. The emotional payoff at the end turns out to be satisfying, but partly because of the relief knowing at last it has come to an end. Not to say it isn't a touching conclusion, but the dragginess has definitely stayed longer than it is welcomed. As for Rabo, he is just a shallow villain with a corrupted yet simple mind, which is a deadly combination on paper and for writing. All he wants was a fight with a god who shares a semblance of similarity with him, hoping that he could at least die by the hands of someone he could relate. Moreover, the inclusion of Rabo and how they framed the story kind of corrupted the upcoming canon story. Nora, the stray weapon, as in Hiki as we get to know later in season 2, supposedly stole Hiyori's memory in order to blackmail Yato into confronting Rabo. This action is pretty severe in my opinion. Not only she involves a living human into the affair, but a person Yato deemed important in his life. So when Yato would let it slide and work with her again later in the second season, it creates a dissonance I couldn't let go so easily because it sidetracked both Yato and Hiki's characters a little too much. Non-canon arcs have always known for being lackluster. Sadly, Noragamis did not escape this fate either, and it even creates a consequence that has disturbed the original narrative. But I would like to give credits to their consistency on sticking with the theme all this while. The conflict between Yato and Yukine is basically a subtext of sacrificial love parents' figure often holds for their children's betterment. The concept of adopting a tool capable of slaying phantoms effectively in exchange of one's vulnerability at mercy to the behavior of the weapons is of such bond. An obligatory one that burdens one side, but also selfless out of caringness. Rabo's story can be interpreted as a bond left untied. Him seeking Yato is an act of clinging to a bygone bond, perhaps due to that little similarity he can only see from Yato, just that one of them has moved on and one of them has not. And the only way to untie it is to seek your past and sever it by yourself. A necessary, long-awaited closure. If Yukine's arc is about the burden of a bond, then Bishamon's story starting on the second season takes on the baton, but larger in scale. Instead of being a more personal character-central arc, it explores the flip side with a heavier tone, having Bishamon, the strongest figure of strength, as the subject for suffering. And because of the similarity, it sort of overshadows what Yato had gone through previously. Both of them adopt regalias, both endure the pain by themselves, and both get harmed badly eventually. But Bishamon's story is able to tap into more depths because of the expanded scale. Instead of dealing with one regalia, she is soft-hearted and found herself wanting to save every stray soul she encounters, no matter of their capabilities. A trauma of her past is the reason of such decision. While her hub grows in number, she is exposing herself to more potential harm due to the imploding nature of a family that is loosely knitted together without much emotional connections. Her negligence is partly to blame. When there are so many regalias under her care, some are bound to be forgotten. One can only have so much attention to offer, and goodwills out of sympathy may not amount to kindness in return. But despite the jealousy brewing between the regalias, they hope to not burden their master by always reassuring her their contentment at all time. Again, staying silent, putting up a front for the sake of harmony, just like the family issue we have discussed earlier. Eventually, things start to spiral down to a point where even the tiniest sparks may cause fire, a bond easily snappable upon any impact. How the negative effect of the blight swings one way is a clever little device within the theme. Relationships between parties are not always equal within the gauge of gain and loss. I'm glad the show explores that and magnifies it with Bishamon and her collection of regalias. While Yato and Yukine is a connection between two, Bishamon's facing a one-to-many scenario. Not only it escalates the concept to a heavier level, but also resulting to different outtakes due to the scope of the circumstances. The consequences of bearing so much responsibilities to the point where even gods may self-destruct. It is not betrayal or spite that inflicts blight on their master, but their distrust for each other living in the same circle. The comfortable hug box of a community that worships one figure, but neglected meaningful connections among themselves. Speaks a lot about how destructive it can be if society just blindly follows a belief without self-reflection, doesn't it? Because of these heavier notes, I much prefer the framework of Bishamon's arc. While it definitely is a redundancy of the subject, it no less heightened the issues and dived into what I deemed interesting of the show, with a subtle statement regarding to the ugly side of social issues lying underneath. There are also much more going on surrounding Bishamon, a betrayal of the villain hoping to take over the crown. Kazuma, Bishamon's most faithful regalia, got his own little backstory revealed, along with Bishamon's vengeance on Yato bringing to light. While in Yato and Yukine's case, random fights are slapped in between to fill up the length on a supposedly short character arc. Everything feels like a one-up over the beginning arc, and it ties up pretty satisfyingly by the end. If anything is worth complaining, I am more bothered by how Bishamon and Kazuma have allowed the exact same tragedy to brew up again after that one hell of a trauma in the past. But I can see past that as a complex Bishamon holds within herself, blinded by rage and an escapism from the truth she realizes all this while. As for the rest of the season, they remain pretty solid despite being altered slightly from the manga, once again for a more rounded conclusion catered to the anime format. It didn't gone completely off track as to being unfaithful, within what I would still call a reasonable change. As for the exploration of the theme, they are still pronounced and even seeps into little details, stuff like how the most loyal regalia would turn into a blessed vessel, signaling the invulnerability of a strong bond. Izanami's obsession of wanting a friend to stay with her in the underworld is another example. She just wants somebody she could bond with, any connections at all. Ebisu's reincarnation is tragic. His death would mean a reset of his memory, leaving all bonds behind no matter how fruitful they were. A hollow continuation of life, while only the people who crosses paths with him may remember them fondly for his sake. Noragami is a commendable show despite not meeting my expectation. Nothing groundbreaking, but just enough decent ideas that I found interesting going to places, justifying the time I spent watching it. Some of the humor and emotional moments also contribute to my liking of the show, and I particularly enjoy the voice-over of Yato performed by Hiroshi Kamiya. I thought his voice is befitting to shows in which the comedic and serious tones interchange rapidly, but his crowning performance will always be Itoshiki Nozomu from Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei in my opinion. The cohesion with the theme of Bond is the takeaway of Noragami. The opening season turns out weaker than the follow-up, but for those who decided to see it through, it makes for a case that the show becomes better as you watch further. Having season 2 reinforces new light upon the already established themes. I definitely prefer the darker take with a few more layers coming from Bishamon's story, instead of a rebellious teenage boy that causes a prolonged drama. Also, there's a filler arc that sort of disrupts the main story, which stings just a little in my experience. What's left untapped relating with the theme got me speculating and hoping for another season to address my curiosity, which is a rare occurrence because I usually don't attach myself with long-running shonen materials after watching however much the anime has covered. Not much of a shonen manga reader myself, though I'm opening to the idea of reading the manga. Subjects like Nora and Yato, the backstory behind a stray god with a stray weapon, both easily forgettable beings, or the connection or lack thereof between heaven and hell. I ended up wishing to know more about the possibilities beyond what's been told on screen. I guess they have successfully bonded me with the series, huh? But that's just me. Feel free to let me know which arc do you enjoy the most and why. What do you think about the theme of bond being portrayed here in Noragami? And why is Hiyori just such a sweetie? Let me know in the comments down below or tweet at me at moonanime9. Give me a follow over there and subscribe to my channel to make a full circle with the bonding shenanigans. This is a video I had pre-made for a weekly upload bonanza trying to kickstart the channel, so you may look forward for the coming weeks as I'm trying to play the YouTube game. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you from the moon. Jikai on Moon Anime.